Hello, my name is Catharine and I'm a volunteer guide at the Ashmolean Museum in Oxford. Today I'm going to talk about Islamic Middle Eastern art and in particular the story of Khosrow and Shirin. But first, what do we mean by the Islamic Middle East? Around 1400 years ago, a new religion, Islam, was established by the Prophet Muhammad among the people of the Arabian Peninsula. Within 100 years, the new Islamic empire stretched over a vast region, from Spain, particularly southern Spain, to the Indus Valley, and extended even further in a few generations along the trade routes to East Africa, Southeast Asia, and China. Gallery 31 in the Ashmolean Museum displays artifacts made over a period of more than 1,000 years in the heart of the Islamic world, with many artifacts from what is now Iran, Iraq, Turkey, and Egypt. I'm going to talk about a fragment of pottery that tells one of the most well-known love stories in the Persian world. This is the base fragment of a dish, which, as you can see, depicts a woman combing her hair. The dish was made in Iran in the late 16th, early 17th century. It's made of fritware with a polychrome underglaze. It's a gift from the Gerald Reitlinger collection. As you can see, the woman is sitting in a river which flows either side of her, with one leg curled up and the other stretched out. She appears to be combing her hair, where the strands are separated out. The top half of her body is unclothed, although her hair and arms modestly conceal her breasts. There seemed to be rings around her waist that denote that she was a well-nourished young woman and so healthy. She seems to be wearing either baggy trousers or a skirt that is covered with a fish scale pattern, which was typical of the period, but which also, to my mind, makes her look a little like a mermaid. And this view shows how the picture of the woman would sit at the bottom of the bowl under whatever was in it, maybe water to wash your hands in, so she would be looking up at you. Now, this is an interesting depiction because in the West, we think of Islamic art as not representing the human form and to be focused far more on geometric designs, symmetrical vegetal forms, and calligraphy. Something like this star tile, for example, which is also in Gallery 31. It was made in the late 13th, early 14th century in Iran, like the base fragment of the dish. As you can see, it has quite a formal, symmetrical vegetal decoration of what look like leaves in the center of the tile, with calligraphic decoration around the edge against a background of blue. However, if the depiction of the human figure or animal is to be used in a secular context, then it is allowed, and some human representation is found in Islamic art, though not usually in as explicit a form as on this bowl. The reason for this is that the picture on this bowl refers to a very well-known story, the legend of Khosrow, who's also called Khosrow, and Shirin. The story is one of the great Persian romantic narratives and is like the Romeo and Juliet of the Persian world. It is the love story of the Sasanian king Khosrow II, who ruled from 590 to 628 AD, and Shirin, a Christian princess from Armenia. The romance starts before the pair meet. They fall in love after hearing physical descriptions of each other. Khosrow then travels to Armenia to find the beautiful and accomplished woman he has heard about, and she travels to Madain to find him. On the way, their paths cross. Khosrow sees a beautiful woman bathing in the river and, overwhelmed by her beauty, watches her from behind a rocky outcrop. He has no idea who she is, and because he is disguised in peasant clothes, she doesn't know who he is. They carry on passing like ships in the night until eventually they meet up. Shirin agrees to marry Khosrow if he takes back his kingdom, which has been conquered. However, the price of the Emperor of Constantinople helping him to do this is that he marries his daughter, Mariam. To cut a long story short, after many more trials and tribulations, they do marry, as Mariam dies and Farhad, another suitor for Shirin, is also mysteriously found dead. They have a moment of happiness until Shiroy, Khosrow's son by his first marriage, murders his father as he too wants to marry Shirin. Rather than marry her stepson, Shirin kills herself, and they are buried together in the same grave. Just as if we saw a picture of a young girl in a white robe with flowing hair leaning against the balcony of a palazzo in Verona, we might think of Juliet waiting for Romeo. So certain scenes from the story were favourites of poets and illustrators and well known by the public. And this river scene is one of them. In fact, there is a manuscript in the Bodleian Library in Oxford with exactly this scene, and also versions in various other media in other museums. So, for example, in these three examples that belong to the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York, we see the bathing scene in two folios. The first from 15th century Iran. The calligraphy tells the poem above the picture, which is painted in ink, opaque watercolour and gold on paper. The pond is now black because of oxidization, but would have been silver to complement the gold of the sky. And the second folio is from the 16th century, again attributed to Iran. In this version, as you can see, both Shirin and Khosrow appear to have a lot of attendants, although it is more usual for Shirin to be on her own, as according to the story, she sent all her attendants away. Then we have another example, but this time in a different medium, in velvet. You can see Shirin at the bottom of the fragment in red velvet trousers. The rest of her clothes are hanging neatly from the branch of a tree above her head. The rear end of a horse on the left is, we assume, Khosrow's horse. The black silk used for her hair has oxidized in places, and only the foundation fabric remains now. What is interesting to note is that there are certain elements that are common to most depictions. For example, Shirin's long dark hair sweeps down over her shoulders and modestly covers her breasts in all the depictions shown here. And she is naked in her top half, but clothed on her bottom half. Usually, but not always, as we've seen in the 16th century folio, Shirin's attendants are not visible. Often, if Khosrow is depicted, he is raising a hand to his mouth in astonishment at her beauty, as in the Bodleian manuscript, which isn't shown here, but which you can visit in the library. As I mentioned earlier, the bowl is made of fritware. This is a ceramic material made of ground quartz and small quantities of clay and finely ground frit. Frit is obtained by pouring molten glass into water and is a technique that first came from China. A technique called underglaze was used. That's to say that the ceramic was painted in these colours before a glaze was applied, either transparent or coloured, and this technique was also originally developed in China. You'll notice the wonderful strong blue colour of the river, which is also picked up in various of the flowers in the background. This beautiful cobalt blue paint is distinctive of potters from the Middle East, who first realised the potential for painting on pottery centuries earlier. At that time, the Middle East seems to have had a monopoly on cobalt imports, which came originally from the Arabian Peninsula. And in this jug with flowers against a fish scale background, you can see another example of this very distinctive strong cobalt blue, which continued to be used in pottery from the Islamic Middle East down the centuries and gave rise to later styles in ceramics such as maiolica, faience and delftware. This jug, which is in the Ashmolean Museum, is in the Islamic Middle Eastern Gallery, was made in the Ottoman period in Turkey in the mid-16th century between 1530 and 1550, probably in Iznik, which is where this wonderful blue glaze comes from. It's made of fritware, painted and glazed, like the fragment of the dish we've been looking at. And it shows the subtle palette of the middle period of the Ottoman Empire with the sage green of the leaves and the soft purple of the flowers, as well as the cobalt blue background. We can also see the fish scale pattern that we find on Shirin's trousers on this jug. Here, it's used to break up the background. It's easy to forget that Khosrow is actually a real person, but this coin reminds us that he was a historical figure, as well as a protagonist in a very well-known romantic narrative. This is an Arab Sasanian coin from the early 1670s AD. We can see here the front and the back of the coin with a representation of King Khosrow II, King of Persia, on the front. He ruled from 1590 to 628 AD, as I've mentioned, and the coin dates from the early 1670s AD. The coin was minted in Iran and is made of silver. It's 30 millimeters in diameter, so about the same size as an English £2 coin. It weighs just over 4 grams, which is much lighter than a £2 coin, which weighs 12 grams on my kitchen scales. And again, it's in the Ashmolean Museum in Gallery 31. So the story of Khosrow and Shirin is a legendary love story, but with a historical basis. And the last thing to mention about this fragment is that the style is quite naturalistic, both in the depiction of Shirin and in the designs of the flowers and the leaves. If we look again at Shirin's face, there is much more expression in there and much more dynamism in the whole plate than in the other examples shown here. Her face is animated and she seems to be leaning back a little. The wonderful, large, splashy flowers and leaves seem also to have a dynamism that is very appealing to a modern Western audience, perhaps. I have to say, I think she looks rather bored, but maybe she is lost in her own thoughts and just enjoying combing her hair in peace. I think what I learned from researching this object is that there can be so much history and culture behind a fragment like this.